Hi, Stu. So we'll just wait 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we'll make a start. I just actually I'll start things off just before introducing Bob and making sure it's connected. Tim's just coming in. Just in terms of club meetings, this obviously is a sort of major club meeting this evening. Next week, which is the 4th of October, is a committee week, so there'll be a committee meeting. And as all of you know, on the 11th of October, we've got the club AGM, which we hope everybody will connect to. And we hope to give an overview of the year that's passed, but also bring some new blood onto the committee. So all the committee roles are up for grabs. All the club members should now have all their membership details, and also should have their nomination details. We'll provide an overview to the committee, and then hopefully we'll have some voting to get some new people onto the committee. As you know, there are 4 positions that are voted on in terms of people coming forward. That's the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, and the treasurer. So all those positions are up for grabs. And then the programme going forward, we've mapped out the next month or so. There's a talk on amateur TV and amateur TV repeaters that is planned. And also we have to have a talk on an overview to the UK landscape for repeaters as well. So those 2 things are planned, and we'll add some more things in. We're thinking that we may actually start some CW again as we get towards the sort of late autumn onwards. So without any further ado, and hopefully Bob, you're there, and welcome you. It's my delight and pleasure on behalf of everybody today to welcome Bob Heil to the club and K9 EID. Bob really doesn't need any introduction from us. It's very, very well known within our family of amateur radio, really, many of us have got his audio products in our shacks and use them daily. And really, Bob is really the authority on audio. It seemed like an interesting subject to talk about optimizing our signals with audio, and that's the subject of Bob's talk this evening. For those of you that want a bit of background, Bob is a trained sound and radio engineer. He created the template for modern rock sound systems, and there's a whole story there, and if you haven't heard it, I'm sure you will hear it in the future about Bob's profile in that, and really developed sound systems for very significant groups that we all love to listen to, Grateful Dead, Who, and also developed the talk box with Peter Frampton. But Bob's been an innovator in amateur radio for a long time, had a business and got a very thriving business in manufacturing audio systems for communication, manufacturing microphones, and also things like satellite dishes as well. As the picture showed earlier on, he is also adept at playing a Wurlitzer organ, so there's obviously a musical component there too. Just before I asked Bob to sort of connect fully on and we take his talk this evening, just my thanks to Chris Taylor at Moonraker. Moonraker is a friend of the club. Chris has helped us before with 1 or 2 talks and talked to us about repeaters. It's with Chris's help that I was able to make contact with Bob and invite him to the club this evening. So Bob, if you can connect, we'd be delighted to welcome you. And what I'll do is I'll pass across the screen to you, and you can take it from there. So welcome to the UK, and welcome to the Milton Keynes Club. The people joined us this evening from a number of the clubs around our area, so it's really from the southeast of England that we've got people connected this evening. So if you just bear with me a little time, I'll share the screen with you, and we can put it across to you, Bob. So welcome. Okay. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. One of the things you'll have to do is spotlight me because I don't do the slides on this computer. I do them on another. So uh, you want me to come up full screen. There's a thing called Spotlight. I think it's in the
Yeah, Brendan, you usually help me with that in terms of spotlighting. You there, Brendan?
Yeah, the dots at the top of Bob's picture.
Yeah, got it. It's in the dots. That's right. Spotlight, yeah. Everybody. There you go.
There you go.
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm always so excited to visit with my friends in England. We love that country. Had it all planned out in January of 2020. My wife had it all worked out. We were coming over, and who knows how long I would have stayed, long in a couple of days. But you know what happened. That was the end of that. We went dormant. Well, the next month in 2020, I started doing Zoom meetings. And this one is number 238, I think, since February 2020. I love sharing this hobby because this hobby is it's what got me where I am. I barely made it through high school. I had other things going on. So I love to share this with you and hopefully do some things. One thing I forgot to ask, how much time do we have?
Well, we normally ask the speaker for about 45 to 55 minutes, something like that, and then allow 10, 15 minutes for questions, if that's okay, Bob.
Okay. Well, I'll cut things quite short because some of these things go an hour and a half easy, but I got a lot of things. Well, I'm going to start with the situation of where I really got going was when I was 12 years old. My parents bought me a Hammond B3 organ. I was taking lessons across the street from Walter Ash Radio, and I'd go over there and watch things and so on. But my organ career took off. When I was 14, I started playing professionally. At the age of 15, I was become the substitute organist at the Fox Theater. Now, why I take time to tell you this is that's where I learned to listen. The organ hadn't been played in about 20 years, and there were 3,500 pipes from 1 inch to 32 foot, and they had to be tuned and voiced. And that anybody can do the tuning octaves, but voicing, you had to really listen, dissect what you were hearing, find out all of the nuances of the different tones. And so that was where I learned to listen. And little did I know it was going to be really the basis of two of my careers. But I went back to Walter Ash after a couple of years of seeing that, being there. And I became a ham radio operator, and my parents brought me up there, and we bought a Harvey Wells and an SX99, and that big box is a converter, 4, 6, and 2 meters. It's an RME converter. I was a technician for 17 years. Why? When I entered, and I didn't know this, but at the time, in 1956 became the biggest sunspot cycle ever. And I figured, wow, this is like this all the time. I'd come home 11, 12 o'clock at night from playing the theater. Band was still open. We're talking 6 meters. And I was just fascinated by being able to build and do things. I wish that picture was a little wider. You see right in the left corner, there's a little blue box with a meter. I had been licensed and on the air for about 3 or 4 weeks. And I read an article in QST to build this. It was a 2E26 on 6 meters. And so that really got me going. I was just going nuts. The Harvey Wells did me well, and it's still there. There it is right there. I used it this morning. I'm on AM on 3885 every morning with the group. And I use other things, but my Harvey Wells is kind of my specialty. But I went on through, I had all kinds of things. One of my friends who was a chief engineer at KMOX CBS in St. Louis, he was one of the first single sideband stations that he had built in 1956 now. Heck, it wasn't even a big deal on the low frequencies. here was Larry on 6-meter sideband, and I would go to visit him when I'd go in to play the organ, and he taught me how to build things, and we did. We built one of the few single sideband transmitters. You'll see it over on the left. It's a Central Electronics 10B that I put together from a kit, and we had to build a 36 megacycle oscillator so we could mix 14 and 36 and come up with 6 meters, 50 megs. I learned how to use a grid dip meter and build things. I also went crazy for antennas. I had a Motorola dealer and a contractor, both hams of mine locally in my town there in southern Illinois, and put up a 110-foot Roan with a 36-foot long Telerex and a pair of J-beams from the UK. My parents were very loving, let me do just about anything, but I was doing very well financially, so they didn't have to worry about paying for any of it. I built a Johnson 6 and 2 Thunderbolt in 1959 that put 1.5 kilowatts on 6-meter sideband, and it really started going. Well, kind of the end of this story, I got a call from Bob Drake of the Drake Company. He said, "Are you the guy that's got that 6-meter sideband rig?" And I said, "I am, sir." He said, "We'd like to invite you to our club meeting. We do this annually, and we ask for technical papers. And we want to know how you did it because we checked with the ARRL, and they only have about 10 of you that are on single sideband on 6 meters." So a friend of mine had an airplane, a little Bonanza, and we flew up to the Biltmore Hotel, 1959, to do my presentation of how I did that. I wanted Larry to go, but CBS wouldn't let him go. They took all the furniture out of one of the floors, and they had all of these manufacturers there. Wes Shum, who brought single sideband to a ham radio in 1948, 6 years before Collins did it. Bill Halligan was there from Hallicrafters, Carl Mosley. All of these great people were there, along with the J-beam guys. And we got to talking. They enjoyed my presentation. They said, "We're looking for somebody that could help us with a big signal on 2 meters. Would you mind if we sent over one of our antennas?" They did. It was 128 elements on 2 meters, J-beams. Again, my Motorola friend and the contractor, they had all the cranes and booms to put this up in a spare lot beside my folks' home, a 40-foot Roan and a 40-foot Roan for a boom. But I had to do all the phasing harnesses. I got very involved in phasing. It was quite something, and we're going to get into it in just a minute. But there's so much more to my life. We'd be here for another 2 or 3 hours. A lot of people, clubs are having me come back and do just about that part of it because the bands were discovering a guy with a soldering iron. This was in the mid 60s by now. And so away we went because we were all over the platform we were building large sound systems. Again, it was all my ham radio that allowed me to do this, had the wherewith. And I was building several monster systems. Those were speakers out of the Fox Theater, 1932. They were Western Electric A4s, and I built some other horns and so on. A lot of history there. But my first job was kind of interesting. The only mixer we had, and I think about this is 1968. The only mixer that was really out there at the time, because any kind of entertainment groups didn't have anything, they were mixers used in radio stations. My first big job was with Jimi Hendrix, and I did him in a 19,000-seat auditorium here in St. Louis, which is about 15 miles west of me here. And Janis Joplin was on there, and it was like, holy smokes. what did I get myself into? I'd got a 30-inch speaker from a patrician hi-fi speaker of Electro Voice and built a bass cabinet, and the word started getting out. All kinds of people were renting my bass speakers, and it was just so much fun. We had a lot of the country stars and so on. But it started into the point where I needed a better mixer, and I needed some kind of way to equalize things. And so I had heard that Longevin had come up with an 8-channel mixer. And so, wow, okay, I called them. This is 1968 now. And I bought 2 of them. And we built a console for them. And the other thing about it was they also built the first equalizer. We hadn't had equalization since the 1930s. We're going to get into that in a minute. I want to finish this up real quick. As I said, I could be here for a long time telling you this rich history. These are just a few of the systems, and we did the Grateful Dead, and of course Peter Frampton. He came over with Humble Pie. He was only, I think, 18. We did almost every concert Humble Pie did in America, and they pulled him out as a solo act. And you can write the rest of that history. But his little girlfriend, they were married in my home. A lot of that happened. The groups would come over and they had to either get married or become a citizen. And hey, it was easy to get married. Anyway, she called me one day and she says, listen, I'm with Peter and I need a Christmas present. And so what did I do? I sent her a talk box, and you can write the rest of his history. And of course, it went to a lot of other people. Joe Walsh, one of my best friends. But this went on for a long, long time. I have to tell you that one of my favorite groups, and I was with them for 6 years. I lived in England on and off for about 4 years at the Marble Arch Hotel. I was kind of the ramrod of where we'd run all of the guys that were in the tours and so on. And Peter and I are friends yet today because he's very technical, and there's a huge story, but we don't have time. We'll come back some night and tell you about all that. But what I want to get into is some of the things that amateur radio gained from a lot of this. And I didn't realize what all was going on in the audio world. I was just putting it together. I'm a ham. I just did it. And everything fell in place. I have to say, I was very fortunate. But one day I got a call from Paul Klipsch. Paul Klipsch was the father of the folded horn, and actually was one of the bigger movements of the hi-fi age in the late 40s. 1950, they really started cranking on, and he was a leader in all of that. And he called me one day. I was stunned because this guy is a big celebrity in the audio world. And I said, Mr. Klipsch, what can I do for you? And he said, you the guy that's got that couple of kilowatt sound system? Well, it happened to be 8,000. It was kind of crazy, but that's what we did. I am, sir. He said, I want to come and see it, because he had never heard about anybody that wasted that much power. He was an efficiency character. So he flew his little airplane up, and all day we had a great time. Why'd you do that? Well, where'd you learn to do that? Ham radio. No, where'd you learn to do that? Ham radio. No, you don't understand. I said, well, you don't understand, Mr. Klipsch. I learned everything from ham radio. He was amazed. Wow. And because I knew a lot about phasing. Where'd you learn that? Antennas. What's it got to do with? And then he going, uh-oh, I hear you. Uh-huh. Phasing is the same. It all depends on what frequency you're talking about. And we had a great relationship. He put me in his plane that night. We went back to his home in Hope, Arkansas. He had a lab. It was an old telephone exchange building that had been vacant. He had 28 acres that thing was on. That's one of his premier K horns that fit in the corner. And this one was plexiglass, so you could see how it was built and so on. Fascinating stuff. But what he did, he guided me to the studies of the Bell Labs. I was taking notes like crazy. And this is all stuff that was very foreign to me in one respect. I'd heard a little bit about what was, but I didn't pay attention. And I was there a couple of days just taking notes. He said, you go and you find this out. You follow this because it's going to help you in your sound system. And what he was talking about was the telephone system. Now, of course, in that time, it was the late 60s and 70s. I had to go to the library to learn this stuff. You guys and gals just go to Google and you got it. And I want you to do this. I want you to take notes, and I sure wish you would follow up. There's just an enormous amount of information from the Bell Labs, but we're going to touch on just a couple that really impact you. And here's what we're talking about. They put the telephone system together. In New Jersey, they had 2 wires. All across the U.S., every 50 miles were relay stations. They kept the voltage up, the current up, the audio response up. Everything was good. So wouldn't you think that when it got to the West Coast and all hooked up and they picked up the telephone, they could hear each other really good, right? Well, this is what they heard, and it absolutely shocked them. There we go. Because this is what they heard. It's like, what happened? Where's all the articulation? What happened? I have a parametric equalizer, and I only took out one thing. 2.5K. You want to write that down. Put it right here. No, you couldn't see it there. Put it here because we're going to talk about it a lot. Here's the deal. They didn't understand what had happened. It was all mushy and bassy. It wasn't real articulate. Let me get this back so you can hear me a little better. And it's so important to have that articulation. And so they started working with scientists. There were 4,000 of them in the Bell Labs. And they had this huge problem because they wanted everything to be like this. And there were 2 lead scientists, Dr. Harvey Fletcher and Weldon Munson. I would hope that you guys and gals know about these guys. They came up with how the human ear works, which also played a big part. The Fletcher-Munson curve. It looks like a ride at Disneyland. You look up here at 100 dB. That's why kids like to listen to music real loud. It's almost flat. They can hear all the bass. They can hear all the vocals. They can hear all the cymbals. But down here, 20, 30 dB level, like you're listening today, what happened? And you heard what happened. And let me change mics. What had happened was, there was no articulation, really. I'm going to do this one more time. When you take out 2.5K, listen what happens. It's the articulation is gone. The essence of sound, the spirit, the sounds, they're gone. I'm only bringing back up 2.5K. And just the very second that I do, wow, it all becomes very clear. 2.5K. Well, Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson and the 4,000 scientists, they had to figure out, what are we going to do about the telephone system? And this is what they came up with. Yeah, the telephone system is 300 to 3,000 cycles wide. Kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? Most transmitters, that's about the bandwidth. Maybe a little bit more on the low end, but not really. But if I take out that 2.5K, I don't touch anything else. It's like, what happened to my audio? Well, this really helped me with my sound systems because I was able to really make it happen. And now that we determined the right frequencies, we could do things. But the telephone system, going back to the 20s, they didn't have equalizers. That name wasn't there. They had no way of taking a frequency out or putting it in. The only way they could do it was with passive filters. And that's exactly what they did to the early telephone system. And they built a high pass filter, and it consists of a capacitor and a resistor to ground. The audio comes in, goes through that cap, depending on how big it is, how much of it is coming through, and all of the lows are going to go to ground depending on the resistor. The other one is the low pass filter. You come in from the full range, all the bass goes through the resistor and on the way, but you can take the high frequency to ground through the cap. And that was really quite something. It saved the telephone system. They finally could get it up where they could make that type of frequency response with passive filters. And not much more was done, except in the beginning of the 30s, this young man, look how young he was. God bless you, John Volkman. He was working at RCA. And what happened is the motion picture industry started having playback systems because talkies were coming in. Up until this point, it was silence. They didn't need a sound system. It was a pipe organ, really. It was a guy in a large Wurlitzer playing the score of what was on the films. And things like that right there. And so what they did is what he did, he had to, his job was to equalize these systems in the film screens. And so what he did, he built this gadget with low pass filters and high pass filters, and he could select them. And he could figure out which ones he needed and build an equalizer. And wow, things were really great. But nothing happened. I know it's hard to believe, but nothing really happened with equalization up until hi-fi. And there you're talking up into the mid to late 50s. And they had a bass and treble control, and all they were passive filters with variable resistors and caps. That's all they were. And they weren't very sophisticated, but it did something until 1967. Now I'll think about this. From 1930 to 1967, equalization was not talked about. In 1967, the Langevin Company, Langevin built studio mixers and studio gear. They came up with the very first commercial equalizer. And there's two of them side by side. You see where you select the frequency on the top, and then you could, with the variable resistor, you could make it plus or you could make it minus. This was a revelation. I mean, it really was a huge step forward. And I was looking into it because I'd heard about Langevin doing this. Oh, man, I need equalization for my sound systems. And I contacted them, and sure enough, they were building an 8-channel mixer. Now, you saw what I had before. This was an 8-channel. And what happened is I had a carpenter build me this really nice wooden console, and we bought two of them and installed them in there. Up above those 2 meters on that panel, that was a compressor and a limiter. I mean, this is wild stuff. It hadn't happened. But up in the right corner was this. And when I'd roll into the arenas and the bands would see all of this, I was light years ahead of what was happening. And it was all about ham radio. And this is why I take all the time I can garner to share all this, because you don't read this, you don't hear about this, and you should be hearing about it, as we're going to show you in a minute. Symmetrics brought up the parametric equalizer a year or two later. This was another biggie. The top picture shows the entire thing. It has a compressor, a limiter, a de-esser, because that was really built for radio. A lot of people have their S's are very predominant, and they could notch those S's out. But it had a 3-band parametric. And at the bottom, you see there are 3 filters. And it had frequency, level, and width. All 3 of them were alike. This one I set at 100 hertz at an octave and a half. That's the bandwidth of that particular filter. And I cut it a little. I don't want a lot of bass. Then the second one, 2.5K, bandwidth of about 3 or 4 octaves, and crank that baby up to +6, because you heard how important it is to have 2.5K. That's all I'm doing. I'm not turning up the bass or anything else. There's 2.5K. And if you don't have it, you got a problem. Your audience is going to have a difficult time understanding the words. And the top filter at around 6K for all the symbols and all that other stuff. Well, this was all happening. And I learned so much from Paul Klipsch and all of those scientists reading. I want you to follow that someday. It's pretty good. I'd been off the air for 12 years. Here comes the good stuff. Been off the air 12 years. Wow. I come back on the air. What happened to my great Art Collins audio, you guys? Oh my gosh. Because this is what I heard. What in the world is this guy doing? Oh no. However,
Whiskey Zero, Oscar Juliet Yankee.
there were some of them that had it right. Well, I had a job in front of me. I wasn't going to let this happen to my ham radio. So I started playing. As I said, I'd been off the air. I had sold my sound company in 1980. I'd been on the road for 13, 14 years. And I got tired of the punk rock and some of the not so cool things that were going on in the music business. And all of my big acts, the Who were off the road, Walsh was off the road, Humble Pie, Frampton. That time, music had kind of degraded a little bit till they figured out what was going to happen. And I said, see you later. So what I did is I started thinking about what I could do to help my fellow ham radio operators. Mainly, I wanted to see if I could help myself first. And I built an equalizer. Little did I know, this had not been done yet in ham radio. A 2-band filter. I designed where the frequencies were because I'd been a year on, I was on 7240s when I came back. I got an advanced and eventually an extra class. And we were on 7240 every night, about 4 or 5 of us. And they were really into audio and other things too. And we all determined that 160 hertz minus or plus, we wanted to minus it. But where were we going to put the top? There was no question, 2.5K. Learned that from the scientist. And we could plus that baby. And so, yeah, this was fun. This is great. So I wrote an article and I sent it in to the ARRL. They called me and they said, this is a revelation, Heil. This has never been done, and we're going to publish it. It's going to be the lead article, and we'll be receiving the cover award. July 1982. It really opened the door for a lot of things, and little did I know. 1999, I got a letter from Dr. Inoue of ICOM. Dr. Inoue had a picture of his station, one of the IC-781s. Remember that rig? It was the first one that had a screen. It was actually a CRT, really a fabulous rig. Many of the contesters and DXers loved it. He says he had that was his rig. Plus, and this was freaking me out, he had my gold line plugged into this, which is a marvelous pairing. I'm thinking of new radio line, and I want to use equalizer. And he was just checking with me to make sure it was 160, 2.5K NY. And he could have figured it out, but he was gracious about it. And so we started working. Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 3, all the way through the line, including sent this to me long ago because they need a little dealie, the 705. Everything, the 7300, 7610, 7800, all the Yaesus have my equalizer in them. And this little guy, you guys have a lot of them over there. I bet you it's a marvelous thing. Better than a 7300 because it's got D-star and 2 meters in it. Everything else is the same, including the equalization. But here's the deal. I'd get on the air after, it was 1999, in the beginning of the 2000s, and I'd hear guys, they still kept it in the default mode because they didn't know how to set the equalizer. It really saddened me. And that's why I started in the day going to a lot of clubs and writing a lot of articles, because we needed help. But it's so simple. Check it out. Look at the 7300. You go to the page that shows you the equalization. You don't have to worry about the frequency. I did that for you. It's at 160 hertz. We're going to notch that. We're not going to plus it. We don't want a lot of bass. We could, but we're not going to, because if you put a lot of bass in it, what happens? It just muddles it up, and now it's hard to understand that 2.5. It distorts things. And I don't understand why a lot of these guys are doing this excessive bass. Isn't it cool? No, it's not cool. No, because it covers up your articulation. So you're gonna get rid of some bass, but the treble is set at 2.5K. You already know what you're going to do with that. You're going to plus that son of a gun. Then for contesting, what are you going to do with that? Well, oh, wait a minute. Forgot the most important part. Good grief. What do you do when you sit down at a radio? What's the first thing you do? You set the transmitter bandwidth. If you're going to do a normal rag chew, just normal rag chew, you're going to set it at a 100 on the low end and 2900 on the top end. Nice full range, roll off a little low, plus that 2.5. This is a beautiful signal. What are you going to do for contesting? We don't want any bass. So you're going to set the bandwidth at 500 to 2500. You're going to narrow it up. You go up to the equalizer, you notch everything you can in the bass, and you plus everything you can in the treble. Yes, it's not pretty sounding. It wasn't meant to be. Well, why do we do it? Well, here's why. This is a very great little demonstration. And right at first, you're going to say, what is he doing? Yes, this is a balloon. You think about your RF being air. We're going to set the bandwidths. So we're going to have 100 on the low end, 2900 on the top end. Okay. But you're going to open up that door to 2.5. In other words, we had plused it. Okay. So you're going to have a little bump at 2.5 where it should be. You're going to have a little more RF there than out at the edges. But what about contesting? You're going to narrow it up. I want all I have, all I can muster at 2.5K. I proved it to you several times. So what are you going to do?
No.
You opened up all you can of 2.5, all of it. You take all the bass you can out. And now what happens? This is what happens. Your RF is mainly at 2.5K where I want it. Yes, it's a rotten, horrible, miserable sounding signal. But when I said an F or an S or a P or a B, there was no problem. And it's why we have to do it. We, in contesting, we know it's terrible sounding. I don't care about how it sounds. I only care that that last country got my call. And he did it because of 2.5K. I can't preach this enough. And all of the Asus or the ICOMs, they all have the same equalizer. They just have a different look about them. There's the 7800, 7851, where it's -2 plus that kind of thing. Well, at Dayton, a couple of years after that, Dr. Hasegawa from Yaesu, he comes into my booth. I want to do it better. Okay. Because we had really worked very, very hard with ICOM. They even had asked me to build them a proper microphone, which I did. Because none of these companies design their mic. They buy them from an OEM company, put their name on it, stuck in a box. You've been fooled for years. I know you think, oh, Heil. Well, no, I'm not. I'm on the inside and I see this and I just boil. Build something proper, not just painted the same color. Because some of those matching microphones don't sound good. Well, Bill said I sound good. Yeah, but you could sound better. And so that's what Dr. Inouye wanted me to do. The ICM is an incredible microphone, and it only works. It only works on ICOM, but boy, does it work, and it's not very expensive. But then Dr. Hasso comes in. I want to do it better. I said, well, we could do a parametric. God, that'd be good. Hold on. What'd be the problem? Education. Education? Yes. What do you mean? Well, with the regular 2-band equalizer, you have 2 knobs. We already figured it out for you as to where the frequencies were and how wide they were going to be. All you had to do was plus or minus. A parametric, as I showed you a little bit ago, we're going to do 3 bands, 3 filters, and you have to figure out what frequency, you have to figure out what bandwidth, and you have to figure out plus or minus. And after I did the first one was the 9000. I love the 9000. It is an amazing transceiver, balanced line audio like all commercial transmitters have, no RFI problems because of that. I took the meter, the ALC meter off. Well, are you crazy? Hi, what are you doing? I put it on, but it's labeled mic gain. That's all you need to see. The ALC, what's that mean? You see that meter over my head. We just want to see it bouncing. We never want to see it up into the red. And it's labeled mic gain. Well, anyway, here we go. I get on the air and I'm in the default. The guys are talking about their new Yaesu and they didn't know how to do it. Well, here it is. It is so simple. You have 3 filters, but you don't have 2 knobs like everything there. You have 9. You have to know 9 of them. And so I forget this stuff. Bill said I sound just fine. Okay, but you could sound better. So here's what we have to do. Frequency, level, width. Remember the parametric I showed you? Well, the Yaesu. That's what I did to the Yaesu. It's a standard old 3-band parametric. And you're going to set the first one at 200 hertz. You could set it at 100. I don't care. I like to do 200. Then you're going to notch it 3 dB and the bandwidth of 2. What's the second one? 900. Why do I choose 900? All of the audio I've done in my whole life, especially in these arenas, there's something about 800 to 1200 hertz. It's boxy. You do this to your ears and you'll hear that boxy sound. You got to get rid of that because it's there. Well, I don't have it. Yes, you do. Get rid of it. 900 minus 3, 2 octaves. And you already know. Boy, I hope you do, or I've been really terrible the first half hour. 2.5K plus 8, let her ride. Yes. And you have to set the bandwidth 100 to 2900. And Yaesu has one other little thing you got to worry about. If you don't save this, it doesn't apply. After you get all what you want to do here, you have to hold the memory button in for a couple of seconds and it'll save it. And then you're ready to go. Now, you notice I made the all the stuff on the left. I've fuzzed all that out because it doesn't mean anything. This is where you get in trouble. Those are all numbers: 101, 102, 103, 104. Another one would have 201, 203. We don't care. But a lot of guys will say, well, man, I got a new 101 and it, okay, you could just go into it and you look at the parametric like this at those 9 particular frequency and level widths. Do it. Frequency, level width, frequency, level width. That's it. 200, 900, and 2.5K. All of this is in the in our website. And there's a lot of stuff about the Yaesu, but there again, you see it. I wrote it out easier: 200, 900, 2500. But you notice there's some in red. Yaesu has not 1, but 2 parametrics. The second one is for when you use compression. You have to do it all over again. Well, let me tell you something, and I'm going to tell you seriously. Don't use compression. We don't need compression. We need equalization. Compression only muddles it up. I've never heard compression and it's not distorted. I know I might have a little better understanding because all of the years I learned to listen. I want you to learn to listen. We don't need that compression. It does not help your signal. It deteriorates it. What makes it 2.5K? Do that. And it's wonderful. That's what you're interested in, not how much you can slam the meter. And it talked about bandwidth. You see, we can vary the bandwidth on the Yaesu. The wide one, as you see, the wide, the red, and then the narrower one, and then the real narrow. And I usually use the around halfway through, and that way gives me a really good understanding. The other thing about it is, what do you do for microphones for that? The PR781 is the golden microphone for ham radio and the podcast movement. It is an incredible mic. It's my PR40, but I rolled the last octave and a half off because the PR40 starts at 28 hertz. That's way beyond. I built that for the broadcasters. Never dreamed it was going to come to ham radio, but it's there. So you really have to tame it. The other one that I truly love is the PR22. There it is on our lighted base. Great articulation. It's got a plus 4 dB rise at 22K. Huh. Wonder where I learned to do that. And it lights up, and it's got balanced output. I'll talk to that in a minute. I hope we get time. I was commissioned by Paul Rogers of Bad Company to build that for him because he didn't want to rely on his audio guys. But We know how to do all this. And if you don't have equalization in your radio, if you have an older one, Julius Jones has a wonderful, and so does Sergi, UR6QW. So there are some outboard equalizers that are really nice. But the bandwidth, I want you to pay attention here as I play this. Bandwidth is very important. Some rigs can't do any more than 2.4. And so they get like a 781 or a PR40. They call me and say, oh, that thing doesn't work because it doesn't have any low end. Listen to what happens to your rig when it filters it out.
Transmitting at 2.9K with.
This is 2.4K, and as you note, it's nice and it's articulate, but the whole bottom end drops out because of the filter network. We'll go back to 2.9.
Now this is the 2.9, and it's much smoother, has much more fidelity.
And so guys have to pay attention to that bandwidth and find out how wide it is. Because if you're going to do any nice rag chew stuff, you got to have that baby out to 2.9. It just has to be. But the microphone elements we develop for the headsets and the DXers, we do that for you. That's our dream machine. That baby is incredible. It just rolls off everything that we don't need and punches it up to 10 dB. It really goes great. One of the best things you can do for your station is to use an oscilloscope. And you're going to say, well, I don't know how to hook it up. It's very simple. You can buy oscilloscopes at the Hemfest today. I bought that one right there for $40. It's a B&K. And I mean, these are high dollar things, probably $2,000 years back, but it's perfect for us. We don't need a 100 meg scope for low frequency stuff. But here's what you got to do. Build a little box, real simple. It takes 2 connectors in and out, and you just hook it in line with your last RF after the transmitter and whatever you got. But you take a center conductor of RG8 and couple the two together, but then you tap off of that with a 51K and a 680 to ground and a 0.04 over to the output to the scope. Is that difficult? No. And this is the most valuable thing I could leave you with if you don't have a scope. And a lot don't, but some of these scopes are several $100 made for the, like a Yaesu and Kenwood. They're great, but boy, the other thing we want to talk about is using your microphone. What are you talking about, Heil? A lot of guys, they don't use their mic right. They're sitting 2 or 3 feet from it. They sound like they're in a roller rink. You can't do that. The scientists told you and me, you never want to be more than 2 inches from a microphone. Because when you do that, you lose every time you double the distance, you lose 6 decibel. Think about this. Now wake up. Think about this. This is a biggie. You lose 6 decibel. That could be a kilowatt or 2. And you say, well, that's no big deal, Heil. You just turn up the gain. Well, then it sounds like I'm in a roller rink. I don't need to do that. Crazy. No, address that microphone right. The other thing is about plosives. Some of us have more air exited than others, and they cause the diaphragm to go down into the voice coil, and you get the P-pops. And this is something that gets a little crazy. Let me get my gain up here. It's supposed to be. The P-pops can be annoying, and so the fix for it is this. Now pay attention though. All of our microphones come with that, or we have it available. It's acoustically transparent, because I'll hear guys on the air, hey, Joe, take that stupid muff off. It muddles you up. If it does, you must have bought it at Walmart or wherever, because it's not acoustically transparent. If I take this off, my audio did not change, not one iota. So, but my breath blast did. And that's what it's for. So you want to be sure that you get rid and fix those plosives. Stay only 2 inches. You got a desk stand. You got to get into it. That's very important. These are all important things. And all of it is up on my website under the support page. There's probably 50, 60 pages, all things ICOM, all things Yaesu, all things Kenwood, Elecraft, and others. And I advise you to go take a look at that because there's so much going on there. And, there's just so much more that I want to get into, but I'm going to do one little thing, and that's something that's very important. Joe Walsh, 2006, he wanted me to build him a professional microphone because their ball microphones were, well, they've been around forever, but you've seen them. They all have to be right here. They can't move around. They got to be right here. He said, build me a microphone that I can move around. And so I did. And this microphone has an Omni front, but a traditional Omni is all around, back and front. Well, we didn't want that. So most of our microphones are set and built so you can move 180 degrees and you don't have any problem. There's no degradation of the audio. No other mic can you do that because we spent a lot of time building it to do that. And Joe says, but I want to get rid of all this stuff in the back. I don't want all that noise. How am I going to get rid of it? So I built the PR40. I built this for Joe. You know, watch the gain on this thing. As I told you, it gets down to 28 cycles and it gets pretty crazy. But here's the deal. Sounds great if you equalize that out a little bit, the low end. The thing about this was he wanted a microphone that would get rid of that rejection in the rear. Yep, kept the front. But watch the screen and listen. The only microphone on the planet that has 40 dB of rear rejection. It's gone. Oh, it still works, but it's 40 down. Aha. Well, the broadcasters really got hip to this pretty quick. The recording studios, they jumped out and realized they could ever build anything that would, but it was something, it was a tool for them. Sirius Radio tossed all their RE20s and bought 250 of these recently. And a lot of artists, they're all using these. And you just, so many things we're doing and we're loving every bit of it. Well, let's talk about this a minute. How did I do that? I did it because of phasing. Phasing is my favorite subject. It is incredible. And you don't read or hear a lot about it, but it affects everything we do. Here's the deal. Every microphone out there, other than ours, has 4 little holes, about 1/8-inch holes. That's the entrance for all the rear that you don't want, that comes under the diaphragm. It would be out of phase, right? Well, now, how do you know that's going to affect it? Well, it's very simple. This probably will be one of the most memorable things of today, although I've given you a lot of memorable. Going to change microphones. Get set. I have 2 microphones here. They're PR22s, Paul Rogers' favorite. One's black, one's red. They're exactly the same. If I put them together, when we put 2 signals together and double it, it goes up 6 dB. No matter how you shake it, you double your power, it's 6 dB, right? Here we go. Well, if I take away one of them, you didn't hear the difference. That's because the human ear can hardly detect, and not say 3, or am I doing it? 3 dB. Double your power is 3. So When I take away 3 dB, you can't hear it. You might want to think about that if you're running 500 watts and you're not making it because you don't have enough equalization and stuff. Kilowatt might not help you. Now, here we go. I'm going to change this other microphone. I have this magic little plug. And, well, big deal. Heil works just the same. It's out of phase. Pin 2 is to 3 and 3 is to 2. Well, they both work exactly alike, but they're out of phase. Watch the screen and listen when you take 2 signals out of phase. You ready? Nothing. They cancel. Nothing. This isn't a magic act. It's the science that I learned from the 4,000 scientists. Years I studied those guys. Well, now, wait a minute. Hey, Walsh, come here. Here's what I did. I built the large diaphragm. No other manufacturer has done this. It's 1 3/8 inches. It's huge. Everything else there, RE20s, Shure, Electric, all of this stuff, they're only like a 1/2 inch to maybe 1 inch. This thing's huge. And we figured out how to tame it. They couldn't do it. I know that for a fact because a Shure engineer came to me after I introduced this on the market, wouldn't know how I did it. He said, we failed. How'd you do that? For me to know, and you $1 million engineer guys to figure it out. Not to be smart with them, but come on, I'm just a lonely little ham. I opened up the whole bottom of this element. The whole bottom. I don't have 4 little holes around the edge. So now anything coming in from the back is 360 degrees around. Under the diaphragm, of course, it's out of phase. So all the mids, the lows, all of that's gone. And so now when we talk into the back, it's gone. It's 40 down. And it's all about phasing. And phasing affects everything we do. How did Wes Shum get rid of the carrier when he brought sideband to us?
No.
How did he get rid of the other sideband? Some idiot piles on top of your frequency, don't care who you are. Well, you hit your notch filter, he's gone. On and on. There's so much to it. 2 signals out of phase, they cancel. And that's why we, in the broadcast world and in all of our pro microphones, we have balanced line microphones, XLRs, 3-pin. Why? You see the red line, that's plus. You see the bottom line, that's minus. That's a differential amplifier. And when it takes those 2 signals, it mixes them into one clean signal. Because, now watch this, look at that. You see that little crinkly blue line? That's RF, that's noise. It's piling in on your cable and into your microphone. Well, the differential end, it only is looking for plus and minus, and it's gone. You don't have all of that. Why are not all of the microphones like that? I don't know. I never did get an answer for that. But I can tell you one thing. They're there. I got it with the 9000. When Dr. Hasagawa started working with me, or I was working with him, I got everything I asked for. I got that meter renamed. It had a beautiful equalizer. And it had a balanced line input. You go look at the input of a 9000, and that's the connector it has, a 3-pin balanced commercial microphone input. The preamps are, from that day forward, they all have a differential amp, but they don't use it. They unbalance things. Well, all of our cables with all of our balanced microphones, they take advantage of that. And so all of your transmitters, just about all of them, we can put a balanced line cable and a balanced line microphone and get rid of a lot of RF and noise and nonsense. It's just so, so important. And I'm never reading about this kind of stuff. And I built a phased array. I really loved phased arrays, but I didn't think I had enough room, but I did. And this one is 64 foot apart, and I put it at 64 foot high. So it's quarter waves. If you can keep it quarter or half waves, you really gain something. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this was 500 feet from the shack here. And there's a relay out there. I used a Maritron. I also have another one using DX Engineering. When I switch it to the left, that's my driven element. But you notice that red piece of coax, it's 43 foot long. And the delay, the time delay makes it out of phase. And so we have rejection from the rear. If we switch the other way, it's the other way. Pay attention to this. You're going to love this. You're never going to forget it. Installation of a 75-meter phased array antenna system consisting of a pair of coaxial dipoles mounted atop a pair of 55-foot telephone poles. We put them in an inverted V fashion, and the poles are 64 foot apart. These are 500 foot from the operating position, fed with RG213. In order to make the antennas directly from east to west, we use a delay line of 43 foot here on 75 meters that's switched in and out of the driven element, either east or west. The downlead length is 126 foot. We take all of that coax, the downlead length, the 43 foot phasing delay line, and mounted them in a container, one of the plastic container boxes that we actually buried, and just the top of it shows. It's all sealed, so it's waterproof. But that's the way we get to switch all the components from 500 foot using one of the Amatron RCS 8V remote switches. It really works well. Take a listen to how we can get at least 10 to 20 dB difference east to west.
Like a lot of people do. Mine's usually 3 inches or so. That's just after you done mow it. And I know, probably, we get a dry day. I'm gonna have to lay out there and mow. That's just all there is to it, because if you leave it that high, when it starts growing in it all, it's looking ragged pretty quick. So it's to that point now, and
the system really performs on weak signals. Take a listen as we switch to the direction they're coming from. Also note the preamplifier makes no difference on 75 meters on this signal. The preamp will, of course, make the meter read higher, but in many cases, the preamplifier does not cause the weak signal to be more readable. Check it out.
Go line.
Well, I see they introduced the point on it, and in their form of portable. What that is.
Totally amazing stuff. And then right off, you're going to say, well, yeah, you got to have a lot of room. No, you don't. A really good friend of mine, K8MN, he happens to be named Dave Heil. He's no relation. Big DXer. Look what he did. 20 meters. Went up the tower, 18 foot of a varnished piece of 2x4, and put up a pair of inverted V's and phased them. Oh my gosh. This is amazing stuff, everybody. I don't know why we don't hear enough, but here's my favorite. And I'm really ticked that over my lifetime, I never heard about this till much later. You always heard, oh boy, the higher you get it, the better. No, it's not. No, it's not. I had a really cool thing I did back in the early 80s. We had a reference antenna, and every night when I came on the air, my 4 or 5 other guys around the country, we could reference that, but I had different antennas at different heights. We all determined the absolute best antenna for 40 meters was a dipole. We had everything, you name it, we had it, making all kinds of crazy stuff even. But dipole won every time. Okay, now, Okay, we started at 20 feet. And I said, well, I'll just take it to 30 feet. Okay, that was that's pretty good.
So
Well, I'm going to take it to 40 feet. Well, that'll be better, won't it? Not really. It really wasn't. I happened to say, well, let's do it at a quarter. The day that I put it at 33 foot, I picked up a half an S unit. And then I put it up at 66 foot. I had over an S unit. And this is what happens because we're paying attention to what's happening with that second signal. And you go, what second signal? Every dipole, every antenna has two rays. One of them is, of course, a direct ray, but the other one is kind of a ghost. It's made from the ground reflection, and the distance can be altered by how high you have it. And the key is to get that baby at a quarter or half so that they join together. That's why it's stronger at those heights. I never knew about this when I got into this hobby. Nobody ever told me about it. But we just go on and on. I have a good hour, 45 minutes that I could go on with all kinds of great stuff about antennas, how to build them, what to do with them. I tell you my last one, I got to show you this. This house that we're in, it's a small lot, and I want a 75 meter, 125 feet, but I don't have it. But I have a 70-foot tree in the back of my yard, but what am I going to do with it? There was a lady that moved across the street last spring. Her husband, who is deceased, unfortunately, was a ham. So she was kind of like, okay. She loaned me her 70-foot tree. It's across the street. And the antenna wire goes across the street at 70 feet. But this is kind of a little secret thing that I never knew about. I'm using wire from MFJ. This stuff is something. It's very strong. It's 7 conductors of really strong wire, but it's real small. You can't see it. And I got it all laid out, but there it is. Can you see it? Barely. And every day when I go out, I look for it. And some days I can't see it at all. But those are things that just intrigued the heck out of me. But we did all kinds of things. I even loaded up a tree one time. You ever try that? Try it. See, you want to try everything. And then I had to show you this today. One of my friends in Kansas City, he had no lot, and he put an attic antenna together. And this attic antenna is amazing. It's 80 meters to 2 meters, and it's a whole bunch of dipole wires in his attic. And it works great. He did a DXCC with this thing on 20 meters, like nothing. It really works great. But I marvel at how he came up with this idea. But this is terrific for us that don't have a lot of room. If you have a doomer and gloomers say it won't work, check this out. Look at his SWR on 40. And on 6, he wanted to be on 51 megs for FM. Look at it. I mean, it's just so simple. But, I can cause a lot of arguments. There's so much more I got here, and that's in the SWR. It don't mean a thing, man. Put it up. If it works, yeah. Just make sure that if you have a solid state final, it'll shut down. But hopefully you got something to tune it out. And last but not least is coax connectors. They're done wrong. I'm sorry. You never know if 100% of those little wires are going to be soldered in those little holes. You do it this way. Yes, it may be sloppy looking, but whoa, 100% of that is okay. I learned this from my engineer when I first got into ham radio in '56. The CBS engineer. And I kind of embarrassed over my life because I'd show people, they'd say, whoa, don't you know how to do this? Yes, I do. Until Some years back, I visited K3LR, the biggest multi-million-dollar contest station on the globe. Guess what? That's how all of his coaxes are done. So I feel pretty good about it. But just so on and on. I'm going to end with one thing I have to tell you about. There's just so much more. Let's come back and talk about some of those other things. Talk about the pine board project. That was another thing that was so good, getting guys to build. But in working with the manufacturers, I could never get them to understand that their receivers needed help. What do you mean? What a great receiver. I'm not talking about sensitivity, selectivity. I'm talking about audio. Every single one, $15,000 to $400, they have about 10% distortion. You've never seen it because they don't publish it. I think they're embarrassed. They did, it's okay. Little junky 3-inch speaker. Oh, we put it in a box and painted the same color. And no, it's still driven by that 1-watt stupid amp. So Paul Klipsch to the rescue. He taught me so much. We built thousands of speakers in our day in the commercial world. And I did it here. Look at that speaker, how big it is for number one. I had to select that. And then I took it out into free air, found out what the cone resonance was, and tuned the cavity to that. So there was no phase distortion. The amplifier is balanced line in, differential amp in, and it's 25 watts at 0.1%. We're talking hi-fi levels. And so, wait a minute. What's going on here, Heil? Well, you're not going to use 25 watts. I realize that. However, I do have a lot of people buying them for small PA systems that plug a microphone straight in. But anyway, where we're going with it is that, yeah, you're going to use a little of it, but man, the headroom is enormous. You are not going to have any problem with that. And then we have the equalizer. And it's kind of sad because some people have tried this, but it's a toy. What we did here is an amazing product. First of all, the best thing about the parametric receive audio system is right here. Headphone amps. There are two of them. They are not wide together. Both of these are stereo, 2-channel. You can have a logger here. You can have an operator here. But that's not the biggie for a lot of people. You can have the left side, right side. And so many of these are being sold today for people that have a hearing imbalance. And I have to tell you, I am so blessed to get the many phone calls and the many emails of guys thanking me because I give them their radio back because they can now hear. The output here is another amplifier out so you can record. You come out of there into your computer. You don't need wide cords. You don't need a bunch of nonsense. Bingo. The equalizers, there are 3 of them. This is a plus or minus, good old shelving, 6K. This is the low freaks, plus or minus at 160. But what do we have here? The magic. It's a parametric from 400 to 4,000. This is the gain of that amplifier. We'll just set that. You very seldom bother that. I have some very cool recordings that I did off air, and they were all flat. It's the way my receiver heard them. Nothing was done to them at all, the way you would hear them. This is kind of a, there's a friend of mine. He's a D104 guy. All he wants is a D104. Oh my gosh, it just cuts your head off.
I thought, well,
And we can put some bass in it.
30 words a minute, and so I speeded up the tape, and
otherwise,
sure enough,
it's very thin. Here comes the goodie. Here's the way you hear this. Listen.
So India is Bravo, Lima Bravo, PI.
Here's the way you hear him.
4 Sierra in Germany.
There it is flat.
From Ireland. India, Alpha Mike, over.
There it is flat.
Hello, CQ sending, CQ sending. So India is Bravo, Lima Bravo, PI8LB calling about.
There is no argument. There is no dissension. All it is wow, how come we haven't had this before? And I figured that working with the manufacturers, I honestly was hoping they would pick up on this and they wouldn't do it. And so I said, okay, it's time for somebody to really do something. There's all kinds of little speakers, and I'm sorry. So we did it and did it right, because I had a whole host of people that taught me as a young kid, and I'm so blessed, so blessed. I really appreciate you letting me come in and showing you some of these things today. There's so much to talk about, and it's not being taught or talked about. A lot of this, especially a lot of you only saw about a third of the antenna things. I had a whole bunch of other antenna projects. They're all in this book, plus them. Go to my website, heilsound.com, and you can download this very, very interesting book that I wrote. It all starts at the microphone, and it will help you a lot. There's some very good tips in there about microphones. I am incredibly blessed and honored. We are the only, Heil Sound is the only manufacturer in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The console you see behind me is the mixer that we built for Pete Townsend and Quadrophenia. It was the first quadraphonic sound system. That white speaker was one of a whole bunch in the back. There were 6 of those for the back, but those are just things. And the amplifiers that we built a lot of very high quality amplifiers. On the other side of that is ZZ Top's mixer and the talk box, and hard to see, but the original talk box that Peter and Joe signed. And recently I was awarded an honorary PhD degree from Mizzou University. You have to remember, here's a kid that barely made it through high school. And I'm incredibly blessed for ham radio, because if it wasn't for ham radio, I'd probably still be playing the organ in the theater, which I still do. And every Saturday, I play a show on WTWW. It's a shortwave station on 5.08, right above WWV. And we do that. I've been doing it in 2016, every Saturday night, because you don't hear much theater organ, but that's what we're doing, and just loving it. So any questions? I sure hope somebody has a few we can help you with.
Well, just before the questions, just let me thank you. I mean, we've been blessed today just listening to you, Bob. It's been absolutely fascinating going through the various, scenarios and the various aspects that you've told us. Many of us have been hams for many, many years, but you've really taught us today, and let's thank you for that. Anybody got any questions at all? We can probably keep you on the spotlight view, but any questions? Bob, I was interested. You obviously work with manufacturers, and we've all got largely got manufactured equipment in our shacks. What's been your favorite?
I don't really have one, because they're like children. They all have different things about them. The only thing I will say is ICOM figured it out early. It's very intuitive. You don't need to read a manual. It's all pretty simple. But some of the others, they get a little crazy, and you got to drag out the manual. At least I do. But they're all good. Elecraft is a great. It's a later company. It wasn't in the early days. Their stuff is wonderful, and Eric and Wayne have done miracles with that company and the gear. So it's really hard for me to say. Really, we'll go back if you really want to know about it. That over there, the old ICO and the Harvey Wells. That's where I spend most of my airtime, believe it or not. But I have to have all this behind me because one of them will call me and say, "Hey, we need to test this or do that and whatever." And like ICOM, they sent a 705 because there was no one that was building a headset for it. And the one they had was junk that somebody built because you know where it came from. And I said, okay. And so we built this. And while at it, I never did much with the handy talkie market. We did now. This is an amazing, because I always hated them. They sounded terrible. I always thought it was a handy talkie. No, it's not. It's that junk they tied into them. We solved that. And it's like $50. It's very inexpensive. And we have them for each one. The backpackers came to me. They wanted something. So I did, most of the stuff I do is somebody asked me to do it. You've heard that several times today. I'm still doing it. I love the BM17. It's not expensive, but it's really, really good. The BM10 has been with me. It was my first headset in 1984. And the DXers, actually, it was a North California DX club asked me to do that. It's real lightweight, still make it. I love it. But these companies asked me. So I really don't have a fave other than I can say that the ICOM is the easiest one to put on the air.
I think many of us would agree with that, actually, already. Many of us have seen the latest offering from Yaesu. Although it may actually sound good, it's a pig to set up, absolute pig to set up, really. We know that from experience. Do we have any other questions at all for Bob at all? Anybody got any more questions?
Well, if I could please say, Bob, it's been a great pleasure meeting you in the States at Dayton on 2 occasions, about 10 years ago, thereabouts, maybe 12, 15 years ago. And you came to the UK and gave a presentation around about 10 years ago. It was either Donington, I think it was Donington, and you gave a presentation. It was wonderful to meet you then too. And I'm pleased to say I use your Gold 9000. I've got the adjustable desk mic and your headphones as well, and brilliant equipment all round. So well done, and you're very knowledgeable. You come over really well indeed. It's lovely to hear you again.
Thank you. The Darlington is dear to us because the guys, we went over and the guys that sponsored me, they got her tickets to the Formula One race that was going on. So we were doing Hamfest. She was out with the race. She still talks about it.
Great. Well, as you probably know, Bob, from the geography, that isn't very far from us. So that's good.
Yeah.
Anybody got any last question for Bob? I know it's getting late this end. It's just gone past 9 p.m. here, so it's getting late in the day here.
Phil, can I pop a question in, please?
Please, good. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Phil. Hi, Bob. Some of us, or quite a lot of us, also run data nodes, and for that, you really need a flat transmitter response. Is there problems with having equalization and running data nodes?
Well, most of the transmitters I measured, they're pretty flat, and they all need equalization. They all need it. You cannot be obstinate. You cannot be a doom and gloomer. Equalization is the key to articulation, and that's the key of putting your signal on top. I've proved it several times today. It's very simple. If you turn off all your EQ, that's what you have. It's very mundane. It's very muffled. And when you put this in a pile up, there's going to be somebody that's got it together, and he's going to be on top. So we have to have it. And Dr. Inouye was the first to see that. And I thank him for that. And we're still doing it with him. And Hasegawa learned about it, but and they all have it. Elecraft has a nice equalizer. So it's something we needed. And I'm really happy that I was able to do that. And the little EQ 200, I still hear of a few of them out there because it's audio. It doesn't change. It's a great product.
Well, thank you, Bob. Let me thank you on behalf of all of us. You've given us a fascinating evening. You sort of educated us and motivated us to look at our equalizers. And certainly it's been a really, really enjoyable evening. So on behalf of all of us, thanks once again. I think the only solution, Bob, is you've got to come back. You've just got to come back and tell us the rest of the story at some point.
Well, I've got some of. I've been doing this since February 2020, as I told you. I've got some of them. I'm coming back the third time, and the second one usually about antennas. They're just I just have a whole hour or two of antennas, and it's just fun stuff. But you don't read it. It's like, what's the matter with these people? Because you don't want to just go out and buy an antenna. There's so much fun in building them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's some of them you have, but I really get into antennas and the phasing and all of that good stuff. And then others want me to come back, and I really want to know how Joe Walsh is, or is Keith Moon, was he really as crazy? Yeah, because I was there. Did you ever hear over there, I would hope so, about the opening night of Quadrophenia? I mean, Pete and I worked for several years to get all the gear together. It was the first quad system, and the opening night that we were at the Cow Palace in California. We're in the middle of the set. I look over, I always stood behind Pete's amps, and he's about 8 feet to my right. I saw some of the most incredible drumming in anybody's life from Keith Moon. And I look over, and he's all slumped over his drums. And Pete keeps playing. He comes to me, what's wrong with him? We figured he was spoofing, right? No, he was passed out. It's like, what did he do? And it's like, now what are we going to do? This is what happened. This is a true story. We had to carry him out. Oh, you want the end of the story? The doctor, we always carry the doctor with us because of him. And I go backstage then, and I said to the doc, what's going on? He said, well, he took a tranquilizer for a 2,500-pound horse. I got a lot of stories.
I'm sure you have. All next time, thank Bob. You. It's been absolutely fantastic listening to you this evening. So let me thank you once again. You take care. You keep safe, and hopefully we'll see you very soon again for episode 2. That'd be great. All on antennas.
I really want to thank Chris for asking me, and I hope you guys and gals get to visit Moonraker, because they've got all of our new stuff, and you want to go check it out. And that's a place to do it. Okay.
Excellent. Yeah. Good. There we go, Chris.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Bob. You take care. We hopefully see you very soon again.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for all the best in the UK.